right, hello again, everyone. So we'll try and do our little talk about veterinary medicine this way. Hopefully you'll be able to hear much better and things will go smoother. I will go ahead and just repeat everything I said, just in case you couldn't hear some stuff well when I was doing it before. So if you feel you've heard something, then you can just skip over it and go to the next part. So I will start back with what made me decide I wanted to become a veterinarian, and that really goes back to when I was a child. It is the only thing I've really ever considered doing. My dad was a veterinarian, and when I was, I can remember back even being 5, riding around with him, doing farm calls, and so most of my early childhood memories involve doing stuff with him. And so really, from the very beginning all the way up through high school, through college, the only thing I really ever thought about and considered was veterinary medicine. I really thought I enjoyed doing the farm calls, things like that, and so that's just what I pictured myself doing. I went to Greenville High, then after graduating there I went to Carson Newman College, and I studied there for 4 years before going to Auburn and and doing my vet school there to become a veterinarian. When I finished my vet school, then I moved back to Greenville and I began practicing with my father. By this time, he did not have much in the way of small or in large animal business. He did a lot of dairy work, and if you know much about the dairy industry in East Tennessee in the 90s, it significantly decreased, and so he began doing a lot more small animal. And so when I came on, then I ended up doing more, helping do more of that than doing with a large animal. So that is a fairly typical path for people who want to become veterinarians to take. It is not the only way. Certainly up to the high school graduation or getting the equivalent degree there and getting into undergrad is the same. Once you are in undergrad, though, there are a couple different ways that you can proceed. Basically, if you looked at each individual school, they all have their individual requirements. They are mostly the same, but there can be some small differences in what they require. But basically, you just look at the requirements and fulfill all those. They have certain classes you have to take. Certainly, it's heavily based in science, some math, but there's also just some other things to help keep the balance. Once you've completed all those courses, and you could then apply and possibly get accepted into vet school. It usually takes a minimum of 3 years in order to do that, and so that's why honestly a lot of people go ahead and do the 4th year of study just to go ahead and graduate with their or finish and have a graduate degree rather than going immediately to vet school. But I certainly had a couple of classmates who opted not to do that. And there are also some who did not get in on the first time or had other stuff that they wanted to do and other careers that they had chosen and came back, and so they were they'd either gotten a master's degree or we had somebody who was a pharmacist, and so they came back and made sure their core requirements were all met, and then applied and went on. So all in all, usually you're looking at around 8 years or so, give or take a year or two, to complete veterinary medicine. Once you have completed your 4 years, right before the end of the 4th year, sort of in the winter time, there is a big national exam that everybody takes who is in all the vet schools, and you have to pass that exam if you want to be able to become a licensed veterinarian anywhere in America. So if you pass that and you graduate from vet school, then you are free to practice. But there are also some who will choose to become a specialist. They really enjoy something, they want to study it much more. They're very interested in surgery, they're very interested in the eye, something like that, and so they will go and specialize and focus on that. And a program like that can take anywhere from 2 to 3 years depending on what you're doing. So that's sort of an overview of sort of my background of how I became a vet and the steps required to get there. I'd give a few pieces of advice, sort of 3 things I think about that I would, if I was your all's age and when I was your age, and what I really focused on and really helped me to, I feel, to get into vet school. A few things that I did. One was grades are not everything, but you do have to think about them, and so you can go to the vet school websites and you can look and you can see what the statistics were for the previous year's class, and so you can find out things like GPA, stuff like that, and that can help you see what you need to do to be competitive. Just because your GPA is lower than theirs does not mean you won't get in. If your GPA is higher than the average before, it doesn't mean you will get in. There are a lot of other factors that go into that, and so it is one thing, and so you certainly you need good grades. It does help a lot, but it is not the only thing. One of the most important things, I think, is just getting the experience in the field, and so going to work at a veterinary clinic is very important. You can do that as a volunteer. That is great, but I also encourage you to try and find a job and work. Just because, again, I think I told you as we were trying to do the lecture that the volunteers, they get to see the best of everything. You know, they get to watch. They do what they want to. If they don't want to do something, they don't have to. It's really up to them what they do. Versus an employee, they have to do all the dirty work. They don't get to do the glorious stuff and all the fun stuff. And so and that can be important for a couple reasons. One, when you do become a veterinarian, it's important to know what your workers have done so that you can relate to them and help them, and it just helps you have a better relationship if you've experienced the difficulties of trying to clean out a parvo cage where you've got bloody diarrhea and vomit everywhere, or the difficulties of trying to hold a cat still while you're trying to get a blood sample when there's not very many options to find. And so just like I said, doing those things, it's important. And then also, if I were someone and I had two people who were everything else being equal, except one got all their experience volunteering and one got all their experience by holding the job, then I would pick the one who held the job again, because I knew they saw the bad side of things and they still wanted to do it, versus the one who just volunteered. They may not know all the downsides and the difficulties that come along with veterinary medicine, and so they might not be as prepared. And then the third thing is just trying to be as well-rounded, doing other extracurricular activities as you can, but always keeping in focus. When I was in college, I did play soccer for my college, or at least I was on the team, I'll say. I didn't play a whole lot, but I enjoyed it, and I thought it gave me sort of a little bit of an edge, because again, it sort of gave me other things other than just studying all the time that they could look to and point, and as long as I kept my grades up, then it just helped me look like someone who did more, but I always kept in mind, what my priority was, and if I felt my grades were starting to suffer, then I was going to be ready to give it up, because I knew soccer was not going to take me anywhere. I was just doing it because I enjoyed it. But then, doing other things, joining clubs, things like that is important, especially if you can get some leadership roles. Just it makes your resume look good, and it gives you good practice at communication, at leading, at doing things you would need to, because when you're a veterinarian, you may not be the main boss, but you're going to be in charge of people, and you need to know how to relate to them. You need to know how to help direct people. You'll give orders, you'll take orders, and so it just helps keep you and show that you're a well-rounded individual. So those would be some pieces of advice that I would give for you. For those of you who are just wanting to sort of know what veterinarians do, I mentioned that most people think about it as it's working with dogs, cats, horses, cows, other farm animals, doing things like that, and just giving shots, taking care of them. And while that is a large part in what most people do, it is not the only thing that can be done. There are about 22 different specialties inside of veterinary medicine, so there's a wide range of things that you can find to do. We have people who only do surgeries. We have people who only do surgeries on small animals, people who only do surgeries on horses, who only do it on cattle. You have people who all they do is look at x-rays and CT scans and MRIs. So we have a lot of people who specialize like that, and a lot of that again is with the animals that we're accustomed to. But then we also have the veterinarians who prefer to work with the zoo animals and the wildlife and help take care of them, and that can be quite exciting work. Then you have others who are more research oriented. They're very academic, and so they enjoy working in the labs. And so there's always veterinarians who are helping that and ensuring that those animals are meeting some minimum standards of care to make sure that they're well cared for and not being mistreated. Then we also have people who work with the government and USDA, CDC, so helping ensure that the food supply is good and making sure that our meat is good, and watching those things, and then working with other things with public health, and holding varying positions there. And then we also have some who just do academics, and they do teaching and things like that in the universities, whether that's at vet school, vet tech school, other things like that. So there is a wide variety of things that you can do. I myself, for what I did, I'll just sort of give you a couple different scenarios of my life, because I've actually done a couple different things with veterinary medicine. We'll rewind 5 years ago, and at that time I was living in Greenville and working with my dad at our small animal clinic, and so I'll just sort of give you a brief overview of what my day would look like. I would usually get to the clinic around 7:45 to 8:15, somewhere in that neighborhood, so usually right around 8. A lot just depended on how many cases that I had in the hospital. Because we would usually start seeing patients at 9, so I just needed to get there in time to make sure that I had time to see everyone that was in the hospital, check up on them, make sure they're doing okay, give them their medications, see what needed to be done for them for that day, where they needed anything added, they needed any new test run, anything like that. And so that's what I would do in that first hour. Then from 9 to 12 we would see patients with appointments and walk-ins. That could be anything from the yearly stuff of vaccinations and just wellness checkups, to having sick animals, having lame animals, having animals that we had been treating and we were just rechecking to check their progress and see how they were doing. Then usually around lunch to about 3 o'clock, that would be our time that we tried not to have anything scheduled so that we could get into surgery and do procedures there, whether that is the elective stuff such as spays and neuters, so just things that people wanted to do, as well as taking care of anything that was in the hospital that required surgery, such as something that had a foreign body that they'd ingested and we had to go take out of the stomach or intestines or anything like that. Then from 3 to 5 again we would see patients, and in reality it was usually more like 6 by the time we would get done seeing everybody. So then at 6 we were just trying to finish up the day's activities. If there was any surgeries left, we would do those. Any procedures needing to be done, we would do those, and then do all our medications and stuff like that in the evening as well. Lunchtime was just sort of on the fly, and then when I had a few minutes, I would eat what I could as I was going in between stuff. And so that's what a basic day looked like. But you also have to keep in mind that we did our own emergency work, and so really during the day, as we had that time planned and our schedule, that could be totally interrupted by a dog that had been hit by a car and coming in and requiring immediate attention, and everything else just has to be put on hold for a little bit until we got that thing stable. And as well, we also met at night. We took our own call, and so there was anywhere from 2 to 3 veterinarians working with me, my dad, and occasionally one other person. And so either every other night or every third night I was on call, and I would usually expect to go in at least once to see something that had an emergency and then needed to be looked at when we were closed. So we had that as well, and then I also had all the records to keep up with what was going on. The least glamorous part of veterinary work probably is the record keeping, and that's just it's very boring, but it's also very important because it lets you know what you've done before and helps you follow up and really stay on top of what's going on with an animal, and helps you look back, because your memory is not going to be 100%, especially when you start getting several things that are close together. Some of the things I loved about that, probably the biggest thing was just the variety of the day. There was never any 2 days that were really the same. We had the same basic schedule, but there were always little variations, and so it was never really boring. So I really liked that. And then the other thing I really liked is just the opportunity to learn, and the fact that we were never I'll never consider myself finished learning. Even after 4 years of school, I'd been in 9 practice, and even now, having been out for 12 years, there's still so much to learn, and always new skills to develop and things like that. So there's just always new things coming along, and so I really enjoyed the opportunity that there's stuff that is new to come out and that we're going to be doing. So that's sort of the life of a general small animal practitioner. But I did about 5 or 6 years ago feel that I was being led in a different path for my life, and that I was going to do more than just treat animals in Greenville, Tennessee. And so I joined an organization called Christian Veterinary Mission that's based out of Seattle, and it basically just it uses veterinary medicine to build relationships with people and just show them love and show them kindness, and hopefully through our actions and through our words share our faith with them. But so through that, I joined an organization in Mongolia that is actually not religious. It's just a teaching NGO. But again, I work at a small animal clinic here and do a lot of the similar stuff that I would do, except that rather than being the one seeing all the patients, I'm just serving as an advisor to the ones who are looking at them and trying to use the experience that I had at my time and help them think through cases. When a veterinarian graduates here, it's very different from training in the States and in many other places in the world. Once they graduate from high school, they have 5 years in vet school, and then they've graduated. But during that time, they have very little hands-on activity. My first year, I was already getting hands-on, doing exams, things like that, and it's just done differently here. And so when they graduated, they didn't have a lot of the surgical skills, surgical things like that, and so the learning curve is very steep when they first get out. And so that's one thing that we just try and help, especially the new veterinarians, but also those who just aren't experienced. Small animal, especially small animal medicine here in Mongolia, is relatively new. It's really only been within the last 10, 15 years that people have really started having pets as we think of them. They had guard dogs, things like that required care, but not really members of the family. So it's a new thing, and so I just help again use my experience, and hopefully it can benefit them. Certainly the way I worked, it helped here because what I have here, we do not have. There's not a lot of advanced things going on as far as my knowledge that I used. If there was something that was extremely difficult, extremely uncommon, then it would just get sent to a referral institution. But they often were expensive, and the demographic of people we served a lot of times couldn't afford that, and so I'd have to try and figure it out on my own. And so we have to do that a lot here. Is we have nowhere where we can refer to. We have probably some of the most advanced equipment in Mongolia, ultrasounds, x-rays. We have the most experience with a lot of that stuff. Other places are starting to get them, but they just don't have as much experience as the clinic that I joined did. It was set up about, I would say 12 years ago, but it was about 12 years when I moved here, so it's now closer to 15, 16 years ago that it was set up, and it's had several people working through it, building it up to what it is today. Like I said, today most of what I do is just try and help advise. Other times, other things I do is work on what we call continuing education. So just classes that basically we can set up for veterinarians to come back and learn and hopefully get updated and improve their skills, both through listening and learning, but also doing hands-on activities. We do, our organization goes out to the countryside and does training veterinarians. So as I mentioned earlier, one of the biggest things is there's such a big amount of knowledge that really is available to veterinarians, but we have to take it and we have to make it practical for what we can do here, because when you're in the Mongolian countryside, you can't do most surgeries. Nobody has anesthesia machines, things like that. So you have to think about what's going on and really how you can do them practically. And so it's a bit of a challenge, but it's something that's very worthwhile, and people want to learn, and they are very very grateful and excited to learn. So it's great work. Then we also have other programs. we had one. This has been several years before I even got here, but they were talking to other people I work with, and they said, this is great. The training is great, but it's also at a loss for us because you teach us what to do, but all the medicines that we're supposed to use don't work because they are cheap. They're not made very good, and so we saw that need, and so several people got together and started working to get good quality drugs registered in Mongolia and begin to import them. And so part of what we do as the organization is just bring in good quality medications that will have ingredients in them that they say, and they are, top quality. It's the same stuff that you get either in the States or in Europe. They could be sold anywhere, and so it's just good quality. And then we also do things just trying to get out into the communities and then help people serve the poor. There's a new program where we're having people buy sheep. And basically, it starts a little micro, several transactions. In the countryside, the herders, they don't have a lot of cash on hand. All their money is in their flock, and so when they need something, they just don't have cash available to buy it. But they have the sheep. But veterinarians, other people don't want to take the sheep because they can't spend the sheep. They need money, and so it's just sort of a difficult thing. But this program uses a donation to allow that veterinarian to take sheep as a form of payment because he's going to get his money from somewhere else. And so with this one little thing, you get the sheep that is used in the purchase goes to a very needy family identified by people in that multiple people in the area. So it's not just one person picking this person, which can have its own sense of problem. It's usually 2 or 3 different people coming together and identifying a person and that they all agree on, and so it helps keep a little bit of accountability on who's getting these things. But so a very needy person gets the sheep. The herder now has medications that they can use to take care of their animals and the rest of their flock to keep them in good health, and then the veterinarian gets to make a sale and gets reimbursed some money for drugs, and so it's a nice little program. So those are some of the things that I help work with here on a daily basis. Very different. Somewhat, I should say very different. When I'm in the clinic, it's somewhat similar. Otherwise, it's different. But it just shows you that with the same degree, there's a couple of different ways that you can look at it, and a couple of different things you can do. As I said, there are a lot of other people who would have totally different stories than mine, and so it can be a very fun career. It can be a very challenging career. It's not all. It's certainly not all easy. You have to be very prepared. It's just it can be very difficult on people mentally. I'll just say veterinarians actually among medical professions have one of the highest suicide rates, and so there are some things that are very challenging about it, but it's also can be extremely rewarding, especially for me, and one of the big reasons I decided to change is it's not so much I enjoy working with the animals, I enjoy helping the animals, but it's more about the people and serving the people. And so for me, I was able to find that niche of where I can help people and by helping their animals. And so there's just all sorts of different ways you can do depending on what your passion is. If it's seeing and treating animals, and that's great, and that's there. If it's learning about disease so that you can help other people and just working in a lab, you can do that. If you want to help make sure that America has food to eat and help with food safety, you can do that. And so there's just so many different things that you can do as a veterinarian. So I hope you enjoyed and learned a little bit about what all veterinarians do, and I will have a little time here, and I know I have some questions that will be coming to me, and I will answer them as I get them and make another little video for that. But if there is any other questions that you have, you all can feel free to reach out, and I will be glad to try and answer them as best I can. Thank you all very much, and I hope you have a great day.